issues. But I see that we do have Les and Fei on, so we can go ahead and do the order that we have planned, Brenda. And we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us. I am Lisa Denton Cooper, and I am the co-chair statewide of the Michigan Dementia Coalition, along with Scott Roberts, who is on the call with us this morning. And Scott is with the University of Michigan Alzheimer's Disease Research Center and School of Public Health. And our third statewide co-chair is Jennifer Leopard, who is president and CEO of the Alzheimer's Association of Michigan. She could not join us this morning, but we have so many of you on the phone and others who are our various committee chairs, an excellent group, and I'm very excited for our meeting this morning. I just want to give you a little bit of an overview before we launch into our first speakers. So we are, as the Michigan Dementia Coalition, in the fourth year of carrying out the goals that we set forth in our 2019 to 2022 roadmap for creating a dementia-capable Michigan. And in the meeting invitation that you received, there is a link to this chart, and it's also on the website, and it looks like this. If you want to dig into the details and see the progress that our coalition has made so far toward achieving the goals that we set forth in our roadmap, what we are looking at today for our meeting today is some of the successes, the goals that have been achieved in our roadmap through the work of some of our committees. We have our steering committee, we have our standing committees. The standing committees have been tasked, as you can see in the chart, if you look at the chart, with various goals, and they have had some great successes. So we want to hear about those today. 4 of those committees, the successes that they have had. And then we're also later on today at 11:30, we're going to be joined by Dr. Judy Heidebrink from University of Michigan, and she and Scott Roberts are going to have a discussion, the latest news and some of the latest controversies surrounding the treatment Aduhelm, which we talked about on some earlier meetings. They're going to tell us some of the latest on that. But with that, I'm going to get ready and we'll get started with our first 2 speakers, who are Dr. Fei Sun from the MSU School of Social Work and Les Dubin from University of Michigan School of Social Work and the U of M Hospital. And they are the co-chairs of the Ending Abuse and Exploitation Committee. And I'm going to see if we can switch here a little bit and make sure that they can share their screens here. So Les and Fei.
Les, do you want me to control the PowerPoint?
Okay, okay, yeah, that'd be great, Fei, if you don't mind doing that.
You see it?
Appreciate that.
Oh, this is not. Did you, let me see. Just, okay. Can you see it?
I can see it. I can't see myself though, so hopefully you all can see and hear me okay. Thumbs up if yes. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you all for being interested in what the work of Michigan Dementia Coalition is doing, and thank you for all of you who are doing all the wonderful work you're doing out in the community. I have been really honored to be a part of this subcommittee within the Michigan Dementia Coalition. It's called Ending Elder Abuse and Neglect. And we have really gathered a wonderful crew of people who are extremely motivated, interested, and willing to share the gifts that they have in working with older adults and their families when people are impacted by dementia. I want to start off by introducing some of the other people. Dr. Fei Sun and I co-lead this group, but I have to say that really the work we do is really a collaboration of all of these experts and professionals who are out there every day trying to identify and reduce neglect and abuse. You can see that I'm from University of Michigan. I work actually at Michigan Medicine in the hospital, but I also am an adjunct lecturer at the School of Social Work. And so I'm coming at this from a number of angles from a personal perspective. And then Dr. Sun is at Michigan State University, and he's going to have an opportunity to share some of his great work separately within this presentation. What I'd like to point out about our committee members at large is that we represent just about every domain of the interdisciplinary team that you can imagine. We have people from law enforcement, we have attorneys, we have nurses, we have case managers, we have people in the banking industry, we have law enforcement, police officers, state police officers. It just really gives us an opportunity to look at the feedback we each hear from our own stakeholders, bring that together to try to identify where we think we should put our work together. And I think what's also really special about this group is because many of us have alliances with other organizations and state agencies, we've tried to be really thoughtful about staying in our lane, trying to think of projects and activities that don't duplicate what other people are doing. And then also the delicacy of trying to make suggestions to people who are already doing great work. The goal that is in the Michigan Dementia Coalition roadmap, when we got together, and I'll talk a little bit more about this when I talk about our meetings, but as a large group, over 100 people, if you look at our history, we all came together and we brainstormed on all kinds of issues we thought were important to bring up. Specific to our elder abuse and neglect subcommittee, some of the goals that we identified, the three primary goals, first were to pursue opportunities to improve the collaboration. Oops, I'm gonna pull this up because I'm having trouble seeing this on the screen myself. I'm sure, I hope you could see it. But to pursue opportunities to improve collaboration regarding vulnerable adult protocols in Michigan and promote training for professionals in various fields who encounter people living with dementia to help improve their interactions. The second goal that we identified as a large group that our subcommittee was going to work on was expanding the adoption of training protocols for financial professionals regarding diminished capacity. And this includes training on the use of the Lichtenberg Financial Decision Screening Scale, as well as promoting training on the diminished capacity for legal professionals, housing counselors, discharge planners and facilities, and other professionals. The third main goal that we wanted to tackle as a subcommittee was to make use of the coalition members' ongoing research regarding the different definitions and interpretations of vulnerable across Michigan's legal, medical, social service, and public safety fields to identify opportunities to address these. That third one is one that we continue to really work through. I will talk more about some of the great work of the Attorney General's Elder Abuse Task Force and the professionals and what they're doing there briefly. But in the first two goals here, I'm going to be going into more detail, and Dr. Sun will talk about one of these as well. We can see the next slide. So what is our subcommittee? Lisa mentioned our overall group has been meeting for about 4 years, put together the, actually more than that. I think this actually started a long time ago, the history, but actively, once we got the roadmap put together in 2019, our subcommittee started to meet every 4 to 6 weeks. At that time, we were meeting via conference call because we weren't so savvy with Zoom. But as the year went on, we transitioned to Zoom meetings, and we met pretty regularly in the early stages. Within our Ending Elder Abuse and Neglect subcommittee, we identified some subcommittees within that subcommittee. The first one I will go into detail at the very end, which is collaborating with Adult Protective Services. That's an agency within our state that does their very best to try to help people age and play safely. But we saw some opportunities and wanted to work with them, and that's been a great experience I will talk about later. We also saw what some other states were doing with the area agency on aging and some collaborative efforts with Adult Protective Service there too. So we have a committee for that. We also have had public service presentations that I'll go into in a moment about financial abuse. And then of course, we have a very high representation from our own committee of people who are involved in the Attorney General's Elder Abuse Task Force. And again, that is a very great dialogue that we get an opportunity to share information from our folks who present at those meetings and participate in the committees, but we also get feedback in real time of what some of the efforts are with the attorney, with the Elder Abuse Task Force. Because we have these subcommittees and we've all been doing a lot of other work, now we're only meeting about every 4 months formally, but we are in connection with one another while we are continuing to do the work we're doing either professionally or in some of our other efforts. The next slide just highlights a little bit about what some of our individual members are doing. Richie Coleman, who's with Pittsfield Township DPS, he has been doing some great work. He has a YouTube channel. He is presenting at the Crime Prevention Association of Michigan. He presented at their 2121 conference. We'll be doing some more work with them. He does public access television programs that really try to educate seniors who are home about some of the most recent and current scams and things to look for to avoid financial exploitation. And he and Dr. Fei Sun will be working to present around at some of the local area agencies on aging. The next one I believe will be in Manistee to really provide program information and things for people to look out for to try to avoid those situations. Ron Tatro is one of our members who is of Elder Law of Michigan, who's extremely involved with the Elder Abuse Task Force. And some of the work they're doing, if you aren't aware, I would encourage you to look that up. But there is a lot of legislative change coming in around guardianship and conservatorship. And, Ron is able to really inform a lot of the folks on that committee about some of the concerns that the Michigan Dementia Coalition has in a way to try to preserve dignity and independence and autonomy for people living with dementia, at the same time trying to make sure that the advocacy options are appropriate. I just want to say one other thing about the Elder Abuse Task Force. We have been really glad that to have had our members be involved in this and have the ability to give some input. This collaboration, what the Attorney General is doing with this effort really highlights some of the great need. And we've been really excited to be a part of that table in those conversations. Dr. Peter Lichtenberg, I had already mentioned about the scale of the financial abuse scales that we're using. I think that most people, he doesn't need much of an introduction. So he now, congratulations, has become the president of the Gerontological Society of America, but he has made so many contributions, including, again, the great work of the Elder Abuse Task Force. So we're really excited to have his input at some of our meetings. Dr. Sun is going to take a moment to himself to talk about what he's doing. And likewise, at the very end, I will talk briefly about some of the trainings we've been doing in collaboration with Adult Protective Services. Next slide.
Hi,
I'm going to let Dr. Go ahead, Fei.
Thank you, Leslie. As Leslie mentioned, I'm from Michigan State University. So from this slide, you are going to see a little bit more green color than blue color, including the sweater I'm wearing. It looks like blue, but actually it's green. So one of the projects I'm doing in the community is called Prevention of Financial Abuse and Fraud among Rural Elders with Cognitive Decline and Dementia. So as you can see in this slide, that's from Federal Trade Commission's 2020 report. So older people, they're less likely to, compared to young people, they're less likely to report a fraud loss. However, they experience a great financial loss due to financial fraud. So that's, and people with dementia, they're 3 times more likely to experience financial fraud. Actually, Richie Coleman is really a good expert in this topic. So this afternoon at 12:45, I'm going to put the link in the chat box. He is going to specifically talking about the pattern of financial fraud in Michigan. So if you are interested and to get into more details about why financial fraud is particular threat for people with advanced age or people with dementia, you can sign up for our workshop in just a little bit. So what will we be providing to people who join this project? So we'll provide them with some education about what is dementia, different types of dementia, what some risk factors for financial fraud and financial abuse, and the linkage between financial fraud and financial abuse with dementia vulnerability. Also, we are going to coach them with some strategies that can help them mitigate those risk factors. And lastly, we'll give them some, not just give them those community or online resources, we actually are going to walk them through, help them navigate, those solid community resources that can actually help them. And some of people who join the group will receive a brief case management services provided by a trained financial abuse prevention specialist. Obviously, for those people who sign up for this project, they're going to receive a small stipend. So actually, we're currently doing in the rural counties in Michigan. So we are focusing the UP areas, also in the Manistee area, and also in the Battle Creek areas. But however, as individuals, if you're an older person, experience some cognitive decline, you can say, oh, if you only have like a, subjective complaints about memory loss, or if you're a family member who are taking care of someone with dementia, you are eligible, to sign up for this project, as long as you live in a rural area. In addition, we are also looking for a rural agency partner who are interested in this issue. If you are interested to bring this program to your community, so we have some funds that are available to be, working with you as a partner. That involves, doing some group training and provide some like case management service in the community. So feel free to reach out to my, project coordinator, Katie, who actually is also here. And you can also reach out to myself at an email address here. I'm going to hand it over to Leslie. I want to emphasize, this is a collaborative work. I received a lot of, support from the people on this screen. I'm very particularly happy to see the Dementia Minds group, people here. So I also received a lot of support from the subcommittee members. It turns out, blue and green can actually work together and turn, a better life for our people with dementia. Leslie, I hand it over to you.
You could not have said that better, Dr. Sun. Thanks so much, Fei. Yes, go blue, go green. Okay, so the last slide, I know we're running out of time here, but I want to talk a little bit about one of our goals that was really important to all of us on the Michigan Dementia Coalition, but in particular our committee, was to just try to identify where the folks at Adult Protective Services and Adult Services thought they could use our support. With Dr. Sun's help, we created a survey that was distributed to all Adult Protective Services and Adult Services staff. And we had a great response from them about the types of information they thought would be helpful from experts around the state to help them do their job a little bit better. And so we were able to get geriatrician experts from Michigan Medicine who are known nationally around some of these concerns. And we were able to provide these 90-minute free trainings to the state of Michigan staff around issues that the APS workers themselves thought they could use more information on. The first meeting, after a lot of effort to pull this together, we used Microsoft Teams, and we had over 400 staff attend on the topic of Alzheimer's and related causes of dementia. And we wanted to really kind of help them understand the different types of cognitive disorders that a person could have, and how over the course of a spectrum of the disease process, how that might impact people's ability to obtain their independence safely in the community. So Dr. Caroline Vitale was helpful with that. In November, we did a presentation on medical and cognitive conditions that cause home safety concerns. And this in particular, we wanted to identify and highlight some of the medical conditions and things like high-risk medications, folks needing insulin if there are sensory deficits, and of course, that issue around just again, trying to age in place safely. The next one we did, because of the COVID surge, put this one off a little bit for safety, just trying to get the maximum amount of people present as possible. We have moved this one to July. But one of the things we understood that was a concern for investigators in the community is how to know, particularly when people are living with dementia, what is bad decision-making versus, a real inability to make decisions. And so we have Dr. Zetlow, who is well-known in this area, to try to provide some guidance and suggestions for how investigators can help understand that a little bit better. We may continue to do some additional topics. It's an ongoing thing. We continue to hear feedback, and we do surveys after these presentations to kind of hear back from folks what is still important for them to understand. The last slide, the very last slide, is that we are continuing to do this work. We invite all of you to participate if anybody has an interest in this or you're familiar with anyone that wants to work in this area. What we plan to do is continue to collaborate, again, with our partners out there doing work with seniors trying to live independently despite a cognitive disorder that will, unfortunately, progress over time in many situations. The other thing, as I mentioned, that third goal is we continue to try to understand and try to really work on the self-neglect issue that can come with some of those nuances of the definition between capacity and vulnerability, and trying to, again, promote independence and aging in place in the community as long as possible, but trying to figure out what can we do to help people do that a little bit better as the disease progresses. So thank you all. I think I went over just a tad, but we really appreciate all of you. Continue to look forward to working with all of you. And if you are interested, just reach out to us anytime.
Whoop, and I'll get myself off of mute there. Thank you, Fei, and thank you, Les, for that. I know that was a lot of information and coming at us fast. So two things I want to note. After the meeting is done today, we're recording it. So I will go ahead and I will edit out the first part. I'll just have the meeting part, and we will have a recording of this. And also we will have the copies of the presenter slides. So in the follow-up email that you get, you'll have a copy of the slides and the recording. So if there were parts that you missed or that you want to think about a little bit more, you can look at those. And then as always, on our website, the midementiacoalition.org, you can find the emails for our committee chairs. But also I'm going to ask if Les and Fei, if you would put your email in the chat box so that people can contact you if they have any questions or if they are interested in getting involved in your work as well. And I'm looking here at the chat box. Are there any questions real quick before we move to the next speaker? I know we're also going to provide for some time for questions a little bit later in our meeting as well. But you can put any questions in the chat box, or you can raise your hand. But I think I'm not seeing any questions, and we see we have the email addresses for Dr. Fei Sun and for Les Dubin. So thank you again for the presentation and all this work. I think when we look at where we set out with our 4-year roadmap and where we are now in the 4th year, this is really one of the things that we can feel very good about the work of your committee. in bringing some of these things to fruition, seeing a need, creating the training and the information, and then getting it out to people who need that information. So thank you very much for your committee's work. So I'm gonna shift us now to our next speaker, which is Brenda Roberts. And Brenda is going to talk about some exciting things that have stemmed from the work of our Lived Experience Committee.
Perfect. Lisa, can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thank you so much. Yes, I'm excited. And when I'm excited, I tend to talk fast. And I know that for many, that's an important issue that I pay attention to. So I'm trying to do that and also be a respecter of the time. But the National Council of the Dementia Minds is the first national nonprofit organization that's funded or founded and governed by persons living with dementia. And our mission is to develop and support a national core. I like to point that out. That means an army of dementia minds groups, persons living with dementia, who create opportunities for dialogue and education about strategies to live well with dementia. Dementia Minds groups consist of persons living with either mild cognitive impairment or dementia. They meet on a weekly basis, and they're supported by a team of 3 individuals. And our meetings are centered around strategies to live well with dementia. And I used the 3 C's today to talk about how we do that. Through connection, creativity, and creation, we create stigma-busting education and dialogue opportunities. That's what the Dementia Minds group is all about. And how we do that, I think we have probably at least 12 Dementia Minds individuals in today's meeting. And I know that they'll all agree that we do that with lots of laughter and fun too. Be happy to announce today the expansion of 6 additional Dementia Minds groups across Michigan. Thanks to a health endowment, a grant through the Michigan Health Endowment Fund, we are partnering with 6 host organizations to start 5 new Dementia Minds groups. Now, what a host organization is an existing community-based organization that has committed to develop and support a Dementia Minds group as an ongoing service to their communities. So that's a huge undertaking for these 6 organizations. Of the 6 host organizations, we'll start 5 new groups because 2 of the host organizations are going to partner together in their community. So ta-da, the big reveal, I'm so excited, and I know everyone else is, to announce that our partners are the Alpena Senior Center is partnering with Besser Senior Living, and they will be starting a group, and they will serve Alpena County. Region 2 Area Agency on Aging, who serves Jackson, Hillsdale, and Lenawee counties. Carewell Services, which is the Region 3B Area Agency on Aging, they'll serve Berry and Calhoun counties. Region 4 Area Agency on Aging, Barron, Cass, and Van Buren counties. And then Teepa Snow's organization, Positive Approach to Care, will cover the rest of the state. So we are like super excited about the fact that any individual across the state who says, I want to join a Dementia Minds group, we will have one available for them. So woohoo, thank you partners who are here today. Thank you. The next is, how can you help? You can help us by identifying potential Dementia Minds participants. And you can refer them to our website, which is dementiaminds.org. And you'll see, I put on this slide, the sunflower, and you'll see on our homepage right there, click to join, and there's all kinds of information, frequently asked questions, and then a link where they can provide us with their contact information. I've also provided in the PowerPoint letter from our board president, who's with us today, Bonnie Erickson, who is a person living with vascular dementia. So it is a personal invitation from persons living with dementia to other persons living with mild cognitive impairment and dementia to join a group. And on Bonnie's letter on one side, it's an invitation from Bonnie. And then on the back side, there's 3 stories from people living with dementia who are in Dementia Minds groups. So you can click on when you receive the PowerPoint and print and share Bonnie's letter, or you can simply suggest to people to go to dementiaminds.org. When I do a Dementia Minds presentation, I never do it justice because it's just me talking. So I never do one without sharing a clip from one of our groups. And I'm like super excited to share. We have a group. It's not exclusively Michigan, but almost all the guys are from Michigan. They've named themselves a Brotherhood of Dementia Minds with the tagline, learning, laughter, and loyalty. And I'm going to share with you a 2-minute video introduction on their next educational piece that they will be doing. So this will give you a flavor of what the groups develop.
You're listening to On the Air with the National Council of Dementia Minds. It's the top of the hour and time for NCDM Radio with your friend and mine, Jay Reinstein. Jay, take it away.
Welcome to NCDM Radio. My name is Jay Reinstein and I am your host. Today's show is all about living well with dementia. Worldwide, more than 55 million people are living with dementia, with nearly 10 million new cases each year. That means that someone is diagnosed with dementia every 3 seconds. Sadly, many people are given few resources about their condition when they receive a diagnosis. They often leave their doctor's office with little hope. On today's show, we're going to be talking about strategies to live well after receiving a dementia diagnosis. Yes, indeed. Contrary to popular opinion, there is life and hope after receiving a dementia diagnosis. If you do not believe me, I think you will after you hear from today's guest, the men from Dementia Minds. I personally know these men, and it is my pleasure to have them on our show today. In fact, I predict now, mark my words, I predict by the conclusion of today's show, these men will have you thinking differently about what it means to live with dementia. Let's start today's program.
So that was Jay Reinstein introducing, laying the groundwork for our next presentation that our group will be doing. And he continues on with the interview with the 8 gentlemen about strategies to live well with dementia. And it's not revealed until the end of the radio talk show that Jay himself is a person living with young onset Alzheimer's disease. So that just gives you a hint about what we're all about, what we're doing. And when our video production that we're putting the finishing touches on, our radio talk show host, I'll make sure you are all aware of our next presentation. And I know that we would be thrilled to have you there. I am like waiting for questions and hoping you have some. I'm happy to answer them. But meanwhile, I'm going to put my name in our website or my email address and information in the chat box. So questions, comments?
So Brenda, I see one question in the chat box here from Alejandro. How do we get to see and hear the rest of that?
That is, we're finishing the editing right now. So we hope to produce it in the next, 2-3 weeks, we'll have it out. And then we will do our typical, you'll get, if you're on our email, you'll get notice of when that presentation will be happening. If you're not on our newsletter, if you go to our website, you can click a link and sign up for our newsletter. And we hope to use this as a recruitment piece for people living with dementia who would like to come into a new group. So yes, Alejandro, we will be showing it many times. And we always look for host organizations. Well, when I say host organizations, sponsor organizations who would say, hey, come on in and show us your presentation. And then we'll do a Q&A afterwards. That's typically how we do our presentations is we come in, we have our video presentation, people watch it, and then our people who presented in the video are available for the questions and answers. So that's how we typically do our presentations. And if you would like to sponsor a presentation for your organization, we would be more than happy to do that. We have several to choose from.
And I also see in the chat from Amy in Region 4, so excited to be a partner with you, Brenda. Brenda, when do those groups start and how do people get involved?
Okay, so those groups will start about midsummer. What we're doing right now, we're working with the host organizations to do their recruitment as well as train those 3 support staff. I get distracted because I look at the chat box. So that's where we're at. So we're hoping mid-July to early August, the new group starting, but we need to start getting names and we'll have opportunities to get people connected today.
So people should, it'll start this summer, but people should not wait, just start contacting you or the host organizations?
Well, actually, we're actually asking that they go through the website or they can contact me directly and I'll help them reach out to their host organizations, to the communities that they're serving. And then Dementia Minds has things happening and we'll continue to invite those new group members to the other events that we're holding so we can keep them engaged and interested until their group is able to start.
And I see a question from Danielle. What does it cost to secure a presentation with Dementia Minds?
Yeah, we really do need to. I forget, the Dementia Minds people who are here, we really do need to start charging for some of our presentations. But what we just do is we, if the organization is especially if it's a nonprofit organization, we do ask that, they make a donation to the National Council of Dementia Minds. If it's a for-profit organization and it's a conference, people are being charged, we might ask for an honorarium for our presenters, that sort of thing. So we work with each individual group because it's more about getting the message out than anything else.
And we do, Brenda, as that reminds me that we do have the link to the Dementia Minds on our Michigan Dementia Coalition website Speakers Bureau. And I'm sharing my screen here if you want to see our Speakers Bureau. So in addition to Brenda and Barry, who is a member of the Lived Experience Committee and the National Council of Dementia Minds, you remind me, Brenda, that we actually have lots of really great opportunities for speakers that members of the Michigan Dementia Coalition beyond the Lived Experience Committee have volunteered their services for. I'm showing on the screen here from our website, the Speakers Bureau page here, and I'm going to stop sharing because I just totally bogarted your presentation.
No, thank you so much. And we're really excited to partner with the host organizations. They've been really supporters of Dementia Minds since our get-go and been involved in, our presentations and have gotten to know us over a period of time. And so they're being our first. We even have an out-of-state organization for another out-of-state of Michigan group. If that's the case, I just want to say that means 6 new Dementia Minds groups in 1 year, which means we will have tripled our size in 1 year. So I hope maybe we can do that for many, many more years because our goal is to have a core of Dementia Minds groups across the country. And thanks to our host organizations here in Michigan, we're going to make it happen.
Thank you, Brenda. And this, again, we're talking about the roadmap that we set out. And this work, the inclusion of people living with dementia at all levels, of discussion. Nothing about us without us. You know, kind of that mantra has been something that we really, from the beginning with the Michigan Dementia Coalition, wanted to see happen, this shift, kind of a societal shift. And your committee and your work with Dementia Minds, you guys have done tremendous, tremendous work, and we're so proud of it. So
Hey, thanks, Lisa. I was muted, but thank you for those kind of remarks.
So I don't see any other questions. So what I'm going to do, let's queue up our next speaker, which is Dr. Irving Vega. And I think, let's see, hopefully Irving can come off. Yep, there he goes. He can come off mute and he's going to start sharing his screen. So Dr. Irving Vega from Michigan State University is one of the co-chairs of the Michigan Dementia Coalition's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And continuing in this theme for today's meeting, he's going to talk about some of the achievements that this committee has made towards some of those roadmap goals, those key roadmap goals that we set out for our coalition efforts. So thank you, Dr. Vega.
Thank you, Lisa. So I'm going to be talking about the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, and the order is actually reversed. Like Lisa said, my name is Irving Vega. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Translation and Neuroscience. And in this committee, I have the pleasure to, let me see if it's not moving. One second. Why is not moving? My screen is frozen for a second. Hold on. There we go. Okay.
There we go.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll move from now. Let me see. Okay, now it's moving. So I'm joined in this committee with Brenda Roberts and Vincent Tilford. We are the co-chair, and we have very diverse members in the committee and are listed here in alphabetical order. And our conversations and our interaction in the committee have helped to develop many different instruments toward achieving the diversity and the representation that we need to work with the issue of dementia. So when I said that the order is reversed, is that in order to achieve representation, the diverse representation, we need to start by establishing an inclusive environment that provides the opportunity for everyone to participate in an equal manner and to be recognized in the same way. An inclusive environment also allows us to reflect on our own feelings and preconceptions on things that we see in society or how we feel when we are confronted with people that are different than us. When you encounter or talk to someone that has a strong accent or the so-called broken English, do you think or your feelings go toward thinking that that person is less smart, less intelligent than you? If someone provides or bring forward a very good idea, but the color of the skin or the ethnicity is different than yours, do you feel the urge to downplay that idea or to rephrase it and make it your own? If someone very eloquently is talking and then reveal to you that is a person living with dementia, do you downplay what you just heard, or how that make you feel, right? So how we include or how we work in the dementia arena, we have to include the opinion of people living with dementia and be able to create that inclusive environment that allow everyone to participate in an equal playing field. If we don't do that, we tend to then focus on what we perceive are the problems. And by thinking or perceiving what the problems are, we might then lead to propose solutions that become new barriers. If we here think that the problem is defense, and steps so that this small kid can actually look at the baseball game. But you have to stop and ask how this small kid got on top of these two big boxes that are actually almost the same or taller than the small kid. So by not including them, we actually now probably build a new barrier instead of solving the problem. That in this case is that they are not included where everyone is being seated. The problem is not the fence. The problem is that they were not included where everyone else sitting watching comfortably the game. One of the first instruments that we developed in the committee was actually a matrix so that every committee in the Dementia Coalition could take in consideration a specific aspect to be inclusive of people living with dementia and people and increase diversity in the committees and bring different opinions. We have also revised and give opinion of different products that other committees have developed so that includes the perspective of diversity, equity, and inclusion, so that we take everyone in consideration when something is developed. One major project that we are working right now is actually developing a education instrument that will be part of the Dementia for Scientists curriculum that was developed by the Michigan Alzheimer Disease Center research education component, which I co-lead with Roger Albin and Peter Lickenberg from Wayne State. The Michigan Alzheimer Disease Center is actually a consortium of Michigan, University of Michigan, Michigan State, and Wayne State. And this curriculum was designed to actually provide education about dementia to researchers and physician researchers in order to bring more attention to different aspects of dementia research. However, we were missing something, and it's the voice from people living with dementia in research. For that reason, we're starting to develop a new model that is going to be about diversity, equity, and inclusion in research. The first model or the first course that we're going to develop in this model of diversity, equity, inclusion is going to be inclusion in research, as Lisa mentioned already, not about us without us. And it's where we're going to incorporate the views of people living with dementia and how that interaction between researchers and people with dementia takes place. And what are the things that we need to be, the researchers in academia and physicians and physician scientists need to take in consideration in order to move forward to understand this terrible disease. This is actually an effort, a joint effort, of course, includes the National Council of Dementia Minds, the Michigan Dementia Coalition, and then the Alzheimer Disease Research Center. Where together we are combining our resources and expertise to come and develop this model for this curriculum that is going to be is available at the national level, and this curriculum has been actually recognized at all the Alzheimer disease centers in the nation. So we're very excited about this project, and hopefully we're going to be able to share to you guys soon. If you have any questions, then now is the time to ask them.
Just a quick comment, Irving, thank you for that great presentation. I put a link in the chat that is the current list of all the modules in that curriculum that And Irving's talking about the additions that will be made with this exciting project. But for those of you who are interested in the general curriculum that it's a part of, can check out that link.
Thank you. And I see some comments in the chat. Discussion about that photo that you showed, that equity cartoon. I think I put it, I'd seen that. I think a number of us have seen it, but we really hadn't thought of it that way at all before. And that was very illuminating. That was a very important visual. And so I'm seeing, I don't know if anybody has any questions, if they want to speak up. I'm seeing again more kudos in the chat. I know as we look at next steps, one of the things that we are thinking about this year, 2022, our roadmap that we put together that we've been working on is our 2019 to 2022 roadmap. And I think we can feel good about the presentation or the progress that has been made, you know, as you demonstrate with this presentation and the tools that that committee has come up with to help move us in this direction toward inclusion, diversity, and equity. Are there certain things that we need to focus on, do you think, moving forward when we put together our 2023 to 2026 roadmap?
Question to me?
Yes.
Or, oh, yes, I think definitely including the perspective of people living with dementia, and also taking in consideration the disproportional, how this dementia disproportionately affects different groups. So how we can be take in mind the people already living with dementia, but also the people that are at higher risk of developing dementia. So make it more relevant in our efforts, not only for the people, not to make it better for people that are currently living with dementia, but then be a resource of all that knowledge that have been developed of different things that we can do that are evidence-based to reduce the risk of developing dementia, and how we can be a resource that can share and digest all that information that are in journals all over, the world, journals all over the world, how we can digest that information and make it accessible to everyone, especially those at higher risk. So we take both people living with dementia and also people that are at higher risk of developing dementia.
Yes, excellent. You know, I know in our roadmap, our current roadmap, we have really talked about inclusion of stakeholders, and that's what the committee has worked on. So now kind of a next level is taking it outside to the external world, getting information out beyond just the stakeholders that we have, I think, made some great success, great progress in opening their eyes. I see a comment question here from Alejandro in the chat. It made me start to consider the inclusion of diversity within types of dementia, including people living with various forms of dementia, FTD, Lewy bodies, etc. We also had some discussion earlier from Alexis Cooper about the inclusion of people with HIV as a group with higher risk factors.
Yes, definitely. The intersectionality that Vince talk all the time in our committee, how our different, how we perceive ourselves, how we present on different factors, multi-factors, right? How we include that, even considering also barriers, different barriers. For example, someone that is mute or have proven listening, hearing problems, blind, all those different, aspects of the individuals, how we take in consideration their barriers and how we can do better to solve those barriers.
Yes. Rich Coleman is asking everybody in the chat too, whether the faith community has been contacted to participate.
Lisa, can I comment to that too for that? Rich, one of the offerings, just an FYI, one of the video offerings, presentation offerings is by the Black Dementia Minds group. And they are a Christian group of Dementia Minds. And so they have put together a phenomenal presentation, and it's geared towards the faith community in the African-American community. So we would be thrilled to also show that, have people sponsor that too. Because I see Terry and Monica and Mia and some of the others here today from that. So I'm speaking on their behalf. And we do plan to include that presentation in our recruitment throughout Michigan for the new groups too.
Excellent. Thank you. And I do see we have a question also about preventing the progress of dementia, not just living with dementia or dealing with dementia or other memory loss and cognitive impairments is much needed in conversations. Yes. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that, Dr. Vega. I think we're going to shift, speaking of, what did you say, risk factors? My hearing aid batteries are telling me they're dying. I need to make a shift in batteries, but I think I have enough time. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker, Joan Ilardo, who is going to talk with us about the amazing work. Again, another set of accomplishments of goals that we set out in the roadmap. The Healthcare System and Provider Education Committee is the committee that Joan has chaired, and they have come up with specific recommendations for curriculum for helping educate practitioners in the field. So Joan, I think you have some slides. And I'm about to not be able to hear you, but I think Joan, did we lose her?
No, I'm here.
There you are. Excellent.
So I'm going to share my screen and give Lisa a little time to go not have screeching in her ear probably. So there's Lisa. Let me see if I can pull up my presentation. And let's do. So everybody can see this? Okay, so I think Leslie gave a nice overview of how these, and as we were in the steering committee and going through and assigning action items to specific groups, we had a big oops, and that oops was we didn't have a provider education group. And so we formed one and named it the Healthcare System and Provider Education Committee. And the healthcare system is so that we're not just educating providers, but we're helping healthcare systems to become more dementia capable. So with that, we were assigned these 4 action items. One was really medication management and reconciliation. The second was to incentivize the adoption of dementia-specific training. The third one was to identify and employ resources related to direct workforce becoming more dementia capable. And the final one was helping to promote early detection and diagnosis and facilitate the use of high quality tools, which we interpreted to be research-based and evidence-based tools or research informed. So to do that, we broke ourselves up into 4 work groups, roughly around those individual action items. So we had a work group with a geriatrician, a public health person, and a geriatric pharmacist, and they looked at different curricula that were available. One of our charges was not to create curriculum, because there's, as Irving was saying, there's all sorts of stuff out there. It was to do some work that would allow people to go to one place to look for curriculum, so that they wouldn't have to do their own searches and everything. So it was a way to help very, very busy practitioners get right to curriculum that would work for them. So we set out identifying things. We had a couple of ways of looking at it. And what we ended up with was these groups. Particularly, you'll notice that we had a lot of work that we did in 2019 and 2020. And as we all know, 2 years ago today, we were all sent home because of COVID. And the folks who worked with older adults, the practitioners, were particularly useful in the healthcare systems at that point. So we were unable to really get everybody together and talk through things, but the work group process still went on throughout the last couple of years. And so we had people from all different professions, from the peer review organization, different health systems, and we had 2 healthcare professionals who volunteered from Dementia Minds, and they're both here. I want to give a shout out to Arnie and Libby, who looked at everything that we were selecting through the eyes of healthcare practitioners who were living with dementias. And so that was very helpful. And fortunately, they said that the curriculum was very good about having people with dementia in mind. And so we're thankful for that. So we went through, and Lisa is going to send you these slides, so I won't go through and go through everything. But you can see that we did a lot of screening. And that's really what the work groups were doing, was looking at things and screening and trying to pick out the best of the best. So we ended up with currently 7 items. And what we'd like to do then, I have it so that we can just glance at each one of these separately, so you can get a feel for what the websites look like and what they have. And we'd like to work with the Communications and Public Awareness Committee to get them on the website in a separate tab for practitioners to be able to just go through and see what's available to them. So with that, let me just I have one more, which is our next step. So as we think about the next iteration of the roadmap, what we'd like to do is recruit and re-enlist more healthcare professionals to work with the Dementia Coalition, that we can keep doing scans of new materials that are coming out, that we can coordinate with the awareness committee to develop a dissemination plan, and also with the cross-sector committee to look at, I guess we'll admit this person, to see if we can work on having dementia-specific training included in health professions licensing, and also then just update the roadmap. So with that, I would like to bring you here, which are the 7. I don't know how we ended up with 7, but we got 7. And I'll make it so that Lisa doesn't have to look at herself. And okay, so the first one we have is CARES. CARES is a CMS recognized training program, and it has different products, as you can see. Let me get back here. Aimed at facilities, individuals, and also for family-focused support. They are excellently done, and you can come to the website and listen to John, who is a wonderful, wonderful advocate for people with dementia and for training healthcare practitioners. And they are willing to give anybody in Michigan a 15% discount on enrolling for these. The next one is CARE, and that stands for kickstarting, assessing, evaluating, and then referring. This was a many-year project by the Gerontological Society of America, which many of us in the academics belong to. It's an incredible tool, and just give you an idea of all the different things. Every section is organized with an overview, approaches, messages, and then it provides tools. So it's a very rich source of information for people. And of course, this is in my way. There we go. The next one is the Alzheimer's Association, which has clinical education. And you can see here that people can, now we can move this back up a little, look. Here are CME courses that can be taken and where they get the information for that. Here are courses in general, a lot of different things here that practitioners can go into. We have HRSA, which is a federal agency that does a tremendous amount of training for healthcare practitioners. And they have another very rich source of data. Every section has the verbiage that goes with it, references a faculty guide if we're going to teach, and then how to get continuing education. So you can see that for all of them. It has those indicators, and you can again glance through these, and there are live links on the slides, so you can get to these websites from there. Then our medication management, we have again a federal agency that has evidence-based tools and things that are really nice that are, you know, right there that practitioners can go to and get. And you can see they're aimed at various levels. We finally have 2 more for medications. One is the calculator, and the other one is for anticholinergic burden. And just to give you an idea of the fast movement of this came into my email just this morning, which is more ARC. So we will look at, as things come up, we will look at these, but I would imagine that we will find this going as the 8th curriculum that we will be doing. So with that, I will stop sharing and come back to the group.
And I see we have a question in the chat for you, Joan. Is CARES training required by state policy for certain healthcare disciplines? Or Alexis, if I didn't ask that right, you can jump in.
At this point, to my knowledge, no specific training is required for any of the healthcare practitioners. I know I'm a licensed social worker, and we are required to have pain management. We are required to have ethics, and we are required now to have
Human trafficking.
Human trafficking. All I could think of was kidnapping. Thank you, Martha. So I mean, you know, there are precedents for requiring healthcare practitioners to have certain requirements for licensing. So we have 45 hours in 3 years that we need to have CE for, and you know, 9 of those hours, I think it is, are required, those 3 topics. So we would like to work with the policy group to see if we can identify some of these kinds of trainings that can go into licensing requirements.
Excellent. And that's, you know, that raises an important point. I know a lot of the work that our committees overall have done, and your committee in particular, has been kind of to build to this place where we can feel confident about, okay, these are tools that people need to know about. And now we are moving into this next space. How do we get people to know about them? And then I think in your case, Joan, in your committee, like you said, where is it that we need to look to actually start to have requirements? You know, there's the one is to encourage, to incentivize perhaps different groups of practitioners to adopt these. But at what point do we say we want to pursue this as something every, you know, whatever the profession is, that everyone should have? I think that's probably where we need to move at this point.
Mm-hmm. I think Arnie wanted to make a comment.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, Arnie.
Yeah,
oh, thanks.
There we go. I think the question that was just asked is, where do we start? As Brenda knows, my argument has always been, you can't start with the physicians. You have to start at the bottom tier. You have to start with the students. You've got to start with the nursing students. You've got to start with any healthcare students, the residents. Any doctor that I'm concerned who's been out for more than 5 years, you're not going to change their mind at this point because they're too busy in their practice. It's got, if they're part of the healthcare system and you can get to people in the healthcare system, then they can force the physicians to go through information training about this. But independently, it's not going to happen because they currently don't have the resources of where to send people.
And we have found that internal medicine and family medicine residency programs have been fertile ground for some of the things, and they're always looking for speakers for didactics, which they have to do. I think it's 4 hours a week. So we keep volunteering to speak at didactics and to talk about early detection and linkages to community resources. So, and we have found that medical students are so overwhelmed with their training that doing it with the residents has been quite successful in raising their awareness of needing to do this.
Hi.
Hi, Libby.
That you have developed some wonderful stuff. That's great. I mean, all the materials and training, and it sounds great. But I have to say, what stood out to me is I didn't ever hear the word patient brought up. So I don't know where we can go with that. But what always comes to mind is when a person's going to get that diagnosis and what happens at that point in time, and what you say as a caregiver, you know, as a health professional, and what you encourage to happen after that diagnosis.
And the CARES curriculum, both of them, CARES and KAER, both have a lot of information for healthcare practitioners about talking with people and working through creating care plans that are very holistic.
Good, good.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I see Terry in the chat box is echoing that too. Medical staff interacting with the persons living with dementia is a big pain point, remains a big pain point.
What we find is that doctors in general don't like talking about things they don't have answers for. And so what a lot of these materials and trainings do is tell them that there really are some answers, and there are things that they can do that maybe you can't write a prescription for, but you certainly can refer people to services and supports that are beneficial for them.
Yeah. I mean, you know, my take is that you can, it's terminal. Yes. Yes, you need to get your life in order. There's certain things you need to do to be proactive, but that's practical. There needs to be, you know, it always historically seemed to be more of a negative, you know, you make it sound like, oh my God, okay, you know, I'm just going to sit here, you know, at home and do nothing. So, you know, you give the diagnosis in an appropriate way, and then you offer things that can be done, or joining. I mean, I'll tell you what, being part of, you know, the solution instead of just the problem has been, I think, very beneficial for me. And you know, anybody else with mild cognitive impairment, that can be true as well, to become part of these support groups, and or, you know, somebody with a healthcare background that can help contribute to things.
Right.
So one of the sets of research that ARP had last summer looked at stigma regarding cognitive impairment and dementias and diagnoses, and they found that physicians had higher levels of stigma. Basically, physicians expected that their patients would react differently, worse than the patients actually would react. The level of stigma among healthcare providers was higher than among the general public, in particular older adults. So kind of some interesting you know, perceptions there. I do see we have a couple of questions, so I'm going to make sure we get those out before we segue into our 11:30 speaker. We have a couple minutes to do some other general announcements. Bonnie asked an important question, Joan, about if the platforms you mentioned are available to the general public.
Most of them are. I think a couple of them have places where you need to register or, you know, to dig deeper. But the Gerontological Society, I mean, I pulled up the links not as a member, but just as a person in the general public. So you can definitely look through those. The CARES curriculum, again, is a company. And so they are, that one you need to purchase. But again, we can get a discounted rate on that if you wanted to do that. And most of the other ones, anything from the federal government, of course, your tax dollars that work for you actually for those. So you can get into those as well. So most of them are highly accessible.
Great. And then I see a couple of more additional conversation in the chat, which I appreciate. At this point in our agenda, before we welcome our speakers for 11:30, we have a couple of minutes if anybody has any announcements or things that they want to share. Because I have the mic, I'm going to actually take this opportunity. A lot of the stuff that we're talking about, the stuff that Joan was talking about, getting this information out to the public and out to the practitioners, the people who need to make use of these tools, really is before us as I think our next big goal. And we really need people who would be willing to be part of our Communications and Public Awareness Committee to help in that regard. We have a particular need for people who are knowledgeable with websites and social media. We've set up a website, we've set up some social media accounts, but getting people to make use of these, driving the information is something that we could do much better at. So looking for opportunities. If you're looking for an opportunity to get involved, we have a huge need for help with communications and public awareness to get the information out. Does anybody have any announcements, some upcoming events or work that they would like to let the group know? Since we've got just a couple of minutes.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, Alexis?
Yes, Alexis. I don't know, it's not specifically for dementia. However, we do have a quality management symposium coming up. And we would like, and I see that there's many AAA representatives here, to have someone potentially present on resources related to the aging population. And if you know anything relative to the aging population with those living with HIV, that is a bonus. That is awesome. If you are willing to present at the Quality Management Symposium, I believe it's occurring, I want to say in June or July of this year. And if so, I'm going to put my email address in the chat, and you can contact me to express if you will be willing, or if you know someone who can present in that relationship of the aging population and living with HIV, and who can provide resources through, to the audience about AAA.
Great. So looking for resources for that upcoming event, Alexa says, and you'll put that in the chat.
An announcement. The Mental Health and Aging Conference is going to be a hybrid conference. It'll either be in person at the Kelly Center, or you can do a hybrid. It'll be a reduced agenda, but it's on May 10th and 11th. And I believe some of the Dementia Minds people will be doing a session, and some of them will be meeting each other for the first time, which is pretty exciting. In person, not Zoom.
Yes, thank you, Charlotte. Yes, the National Council of Dementia Minds, the brotherhood of the gentlemen who call themselves the Brotherhood of Dementia Minds. We will be debuting that video presentation that you saw the little trailer to, and then they will be speaking afterwards, and then there will be more information about the Dementia Minds program. So yeah, they gave us 3 whole hours, you guys. Woohoo!
Excellent. And I see in the chat, Amy Nichols is put a link for an upcoming event that Region 4 AAA is putting on, the Remember Project, to present the first of 3 small plays on destigmatizing dementia, coming up Tuesday. Very exciting. Arnie, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did once again. Excuse me. Some of the language about people with dementia and Alzheimer's and other dementias are changing. The one example I'll give is we're moving away from the term caregiver to care partner, because now the person helping them and the person with dementia can collaborate with things. It's not just one person giving care to another person that can't understand or accept it. So there's a very big difference in that verbiage.
Excellent point. Excellent point. And then I see we do have Dr. Heidebrink has joined us and Scott Roberts. In the meantime, you can go ahead and continue to put links in the chat for upcoming events. If I have a link that or anything that you want me to include in the follow-up email that I'll send out, please let me know that or put it in the chat and I'll take it from there. So thank you for all that good information. And next, I'd like to turn things over to Dr. Scott Roberts, and he is going to have the conversation with Dr. Judy Heidebrink about Aduhelm.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Lisa. Appreciate it. And just to kind of close the loop on the upcoming events, both Dr. Heidebrink and I are part of the Michigan Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. And so we do have an upcoming event March 30th where we'll be talking about some actively recruiting research studies that we've got going on through our center. So if you or anybody you know are interested in learning about some exciting studies that you might be able to take part in, I would encourage you to come to that webinar. But yeah, so shifting gears now, we're going to do what we call our Med-Sci portion of the program. And we're very excited to have Dr. Heidebrink joining us today. For those of you who don't know her, she is a clinical neurologist, faculty member at the University of Michigan School of Medicine. She leads their cognitive disorders clinic, and she's actually calling in today from her clinic day. So we appreciate her fitting us in amidst her busy schedule. And some of you have heard Dr. Heidebrink before because we've actually had a few sessions in prior meetings focused on Aduhelm. And I think we're going to continue this theme because it continues to be such a news generating topic that I think is of high interest to the dementia community. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have more of just kind of a Q&A as opposed to a PowerPoint slide presentation. So I'm going to be posing some questions to Dr. Heidebrink. And then following that, we'll open it up to broader questions to the larger group. So at that point, feel free to put questions in the chat or raise your hand, and then we can hopefully have time to take some questions at the end. But to kick us off, just wanted to kind of provide a little bit of background. So many of you know that Aduhelm is the medication that was approved by the FDA in June 2021 as a treatment for Alzheimer's disease. And so this was the first time in, I think, almost 20 years that we had an FDA-approved medication specifically for Alzheimer's. So a lot of excitement about it. On the other hand, it's generated a lot of controversy as well. And so, Judy, I was hoping you could just briefly describe, what is Aduhelm? What types of patients is it approved for? And why do you think it has generated such controversy?
Sure, just want to make sure everyone can hear me okay. I know it's tough with me being in the clinic room and with the mask, but as you've heard, Aduhelm is really the first Alzheimer's drug approved in a number of years, and it's different than the existing treatments because it's the first one to really sort of directly attack one of the principal pathologic changes of Alzheimer's, the amyloid plaques that accumulate in the brain. And so aducanumab, as it's generically known as, it's a monoclonal antibody. So it's delivered through an intravenous infusion, gets into the brain, binds to the amyloid plaques, and helps the brain's immune system remove those plaques. And the ability to do that, I think, is very well established. That wasn't controversial. That's been established through studies where individuals with symptoms felt due to Alzheimer's and brain imaging evidence of amyloid plaque buildup were given treatments with these infusions on roughly a monthly basis. And over the course of a year or so, you can see that the plaques disappear from the brain with a sufficient dose of the drug. What's been much tougher to know is how helpful is that for individuals, because There are potential side effects. You can develop bleeding or swelling, particularly around the areas where the plaque removal is occurring. And so in the large studies to try to determine the potential benefit, they enrolled individuals with very early symptoms, either mild cognitive impairment or early dementia due to Alzheimer's, all of whom had evidence of plaque buildup through a brain amyloid PET scan. And they were to follow them for up to 18 months on different doses or placebo to see if there was a clinical benefit. But the large studies intending to do that ended up being stopped early because they didn't think that if they continued the trials that they would ultimately see a clinical benefit. So we're kind of left with partial data, and the partial data have been inconsistent as well, where one of the two large studies said we really can't tell a difference between the high dose of the drug or the placebo, and the other one said people on the highest dose seem to have a little bit less decline over the course of the administration of the infusions compared to people on the placebo. So because the data was not stellar, let's put it that way, the FDA ended up approving the drug not through its usual mechanism to say we've got sort of consistent, reliable evidence of the safety and efficacy, but they used something called the accelerated approval mechanism, which is meant to get drugs out to people earlier when they have serious diseases, and can use a biological effect like plaque removal rather than a clinical effect, particularly if that biological effect has strong evidence to think it will have a clinical benefit. And that's where it's still controversial. Do we really know that plaque removal has a clear clinical benefit? And when drugs are approved through that accelerated mechanism, it's sort of a conditional approval too, where there needs to be a confirmatory study to say, does indeed plaque removal with this drug have a clinical benefit for people with early symptoms due to Alzheimer's disease?
Great. Well, thanks, Judy. That's very helpful. So in terms of the specific types of patients it's approved for, can you just say a little bit more about who it seems to be appropriate to use and who it might not be as appropriate?
Yeah, so initially it had sort of a blanket approval for Alzheimer's disease, which could be variously defined. But based on the available data, the approval was sort of refined to say this should be an individual who has, again, early symptoms of Alzheimer's, either in the mild cognitive impairment stage, so they've got some changes in their memory perhaps, but are still functioning independently, or they're in the mild dementia stage, so they're needing some assistance with higher level activities, but again, early on in the sort of continuum, and have to have some evidence of Alzheimer's changes in the brain. So you'd want to know that there is amyloid buildup to be a candidate for receiving this therapy. So that's kind of the main type of person who would be eligible. And there are a lot of other details that might shift someone's eligibility based on, are they at greater risk of side effects, or do they have a lot of other health conditions that could be contributing to their cognitive impairment where you really don't know if it's the Alzheimer's or not. So generally looking for people where it's pretty clear Alzheimer's is the only cause that is clearly established for their symptoms, and don't have high risks for some of the side effects. Like if they were on strong blood thinners, for example, you wouldn't want them on a drug that could promote bleeding in the brain.
Yeah. Well, as if we didn't have enough controversy around the medication, just a couple months ago in January, a major policy decision came out. So, one big question was, well, if it's FDA approved, does that mean it will be covered by insurance? And of course, Medicare is the major insurer for the folks who would be eligible. But then the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services in January came out with their draft policy that provided only limited coverage of the treatment. So usually an FDA approved therapy gets basic coverage, but in this case, the decision was the treatment's going to be made available, but only to those patients who would agree to enroll in clinical trials that would continue to evaluate the benefits and risks of the therapy. So can you tell us a little bit more, Judy, about why this decision that's not a typical one, and what was the reasoning behind that particular decision?
Yeah, so CMS kind of has a standard that they will approve therapies that are reasonable and medically necessary. And my sense is their take was there's not enough information about aducanumab to say that it meets that standard. It was approved through a different mechanism, not based on, clearly clinical benefit. And so I think their draft proposal is to say we really want to see that confirmatory trial to kind of make up with the shortcomings of the halted trials to know, is this treatment clearly reasonable and medically necessary. And so they essentially outlined that they would support it financially if it's being given as part of an NIH-sponsored trial or a trial that has, kind of certain requirements that basically have the ultimate goal of saying, is this clinically meaningful when it's given to patients?
So if someone's going to take part in those trials, is there like a minimum requirement of the length that they need to remain engaged and followed in the trial?
Yeah, so Medicare did produce some recommendations, but not all of the details. But it suggested that it be tested against standard of care, so that there would be a placebo comparison group, and that there needs to be some clinically meaningful outcome, so that people aren't arguing over what does a p-value mean on a scale that's no one has heard of before. They've also thrown in that the trial population should really reflect the diversity of people diagnosed with Alzheimer's dementia. And as many of you may know, historically, clinical trials in Alzheimer's disease have recruited a very selective, biased population where many racial and ethnic groups are underrepresented. So it's a really great goal, but it's not one that's ever been imposed on a drug before to decide whether it should be covered by CMS. And interestingly, they also have indicated that the trial should take place in outpatient settings linked to hospitals, not sort of completely separate research sites. And I think that's for the safety concerns, to make sure people have access to appropriate monitoring, MRI imaging, things like that. So they do have some outlined recommendations for what sort of the standards of this trial should be. They nicely indicate that they understand that some marker to know whether someone has amyloid accumulated in their brain needs to be an inherent part of the study. And so they also agree to cover an amyloid PET scan as part of the qualifying criteria for the trial.
Well, I think as you're alluding to, there are some, constraints here for people to take part in this. And so I think there have been some groups out there that have been quite critical of the CMS decision. Can you say a little bit more about, some of the critiques and what the concerns are about this particular coverage decision?
Yeah, I would say the results have been mixed, and understandably so. On one hand, people will say, well, if this drug is FDA approved, why shouldn't we have access to it paid for by our insurer? Is it Medicare's role to decide whether this is an appropriate drug or not? Other folks have said, well, gosh, if we really need a confirmatory study, this was a conditional approval anyway, why should Medicare fund a trial that maybe the drug company should be paid for or should have completed to begin with? And so those are kind of thoughts on either side. And then a lot of people are in the middle and say, this seems like a reasonable compromise to say, we need more information, and Medicare is willing to contribute financially to help provide a more definitive answer about the value of this medication. And so the public comments, again, if you can log on and see the comments, and they've kind of run that full spectrum of responses.
Yeah, and I think it is now in that stage, as you mentioned, of open public comment. But I've heard that CMS is expected to announce their final decision on April 11th. So what are you anticipating, and what are the next steps once that decision is made?
Yeah, you're right. Their anticipated final decision is mid-April. Assuming that it's very similar to their draft decision, then moving forward, people's access to the drug would essentially be either through private pay or through enrollment in a trial either sponsored directly by the company, maybe under its own rules, or by a trial maybe in conjunction with the Medicare outline criteria, so that Medicare would be contributing to the coverage for the drug itself and for the amyloid PET imaging. So we know Biogen has already envisioned some post-approval trials, one of which I think was just sort of a registry to see who is getting the drug through whatever means and what's their experience. So just more of an observational. But they are envisioning a trial that was already in the works when this draft decision came out. And they're indicating that they really do have a goal of something like 18% enrollment of underrepresented minority population, so that they're really trying to meet the criteria that Medicare has outlined. So it would be something that if the trial succeeds, it would get Medicare's blessing then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioning Biogen, I think they've been critiqued for the high cost of the treatment, which, as you alluded to earlier, it's not just like taking a pill. There needs to be delivered via an infusion. There should ideally be kind of additional tests to confirm someone is amyloid positive, which is usually done via PET scan. My understanding was the initial cost was estimated $56,000, that they've come down to maybe around half of that of $28,000. But even so, it's still not widely available. So I was wondering if you could just tell us more, what is the status here in the state of Michigan? Are there places that this treatment is taking place, or is it still, more just kind of this hypothetical at this point?
Yeah, so there's kind of two parts to that question. One is, who can afford it if it isn't paid for by insurance? And as you mentioned, the drug, just for the drug itself, not for delivering it, not for monitoring it, et cetera, but the drug itself was being priced at $56,000 a year, but now has been cut in half, in part, I think, because of limited uptake of the use of the drug. So that's going to create a significant financial constraint on who is eligible to receive it. But also, many major institutions weigh in for a drug that's delivered in this means to say, can our institution provide this drug in a safe and coordinated manner? And what's the evidence to support use of that drug? So institutions will go through a policy of reviewing the drug to decide, do we add it to our pharmacy offerings in a sense? And Michigan Medicine did their review back last summer based on the available information and declined to add it to the formulary based on insufficient information that the benefits outweigh the risks and that it can be delivered in a safe manner. And I will say that one frustration has been that, when those large studies were halted, that's been 3 years now, and the data is yet to be published. And so it's a bit unusual for people to be administering drugs without the kind of pivotal data behind them being published and accessible to the scientific community. And several other large medical centers reached a similar decision to not provide aducanumab, at least at this point in time. So, but my understanding is there are some sites within Michigan that are providing it. One in Owasso, Michigan, Memorial Healthcare, I believe, and Spectrum Health was arranging a protocol out in Grand Rapids to deliver it. And then the MIND Institute in Southeast Michigan at least had advertised delivering it. Their website isn't clear whether they're continuing to provide it or not. But largely, the individuals who are receiving it, it's being funded by a Biogen patient assistance program, the status of which is, I think, somewhat uncertain. Is that something that they're going to be able to use in perpetuity, or does that change when a clinical trial becomes available? So it's not, like I said, a sort of uniform, organized availability right now. It's individual centers making individual decisions and doing what they can to provide funding for it.
Yeah, and you're coming to us from the Cognitive Disorders Clinic. Are you getting a lot of questions from your patients and families about it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when the FDA approval first took place, we were flooded with phone calls and, kind of created, initial responses saying, here's what we know so far. We'll get back to you with more details. And as we have people come in and can take the time to discuss things, one-on-one, I would say the interest has been much less as people understand the details of what's known, what's unknown, what the potential risks are. And some people are still interested in potentially exploring it through a clinical trial. Others said, I'll wait till, there's better safety data or whatnot. So yeah, a lot of dialogue, but not as much people who are absolutely set to sign up for it at this point.
Mhm. Well, one more question, and then we can open it up to the broader group. But obviously, Aduhelm is not the only anti-amyloid therapy in town. There's a lot of others, similar medications. There's others that might actually be also trying to think about addressing things like tau in the brain. So can you talk a little bit about the other drugs that might be in the pipeline that might be reviewed relatively shortly by FDA, and just give us kind of an overview of what you anticipate coming out in the next year or so?
Sure, there are, as you mentioned, other monoclonal antibodies targeting amyloid that are in the FDA submission process. So once aducanumab received an accelerated approval saying, it is approved because it can have this biological effect on plaques in the brain, these other drugs, they've got pretty strong data. They can do the same thing too. And so it was sort of a quick reaction. We can submit our drug for the same accelerated approval. And so the companies that make donanemab and lecanemab are in the process of rolling submissions to the FDA. Although once Medicare released its draft decision, they've taken a little pause and said, oh, maybe if we got accelerated approval, it may not mean anything in terms of people having access if Medicare is not going to cover it. So maybe we'll wait till our pivotal phase 3 studies give us a feedback about the clinical benefit before we kind of fully submit to the FDA. So those are, kind of in a constant state of flux about how much and when they're going to ask the FDA to officially weigh in and what type of approval process. Because right now they were leaning towards the accelerated approval, but now recognize that might not actually get the drug to patients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can just add on to that. So yeah, I think there is the good news is, even though maybe Aduhelm hasn't been the slam dunk exciting breakthrough that many had hoped, there still are many other possibilities, I think, on the horizon. And in addition, I think we're talking a lot about drugs that are meant to treat folks with cognitive impairment. There are a lot of other major prevention trials that are pretty far into their data collection, where we hopefully will get some results before long. Again, these medications that are trying to be administered before people even manifest any symptoms, but to have the the biomarker evidence. So all right, well, I want to make sure we get to hear from other folks. So there have been a few questions in the chat, but thanks, Judy. This is fantastic information, and I'm glad we're recording this because others might be able to benefit from it as well. So my first question I see is from Alejandro, wanting to hear just a little bit more about, you mentioned that there might be certain conditions or medications that people are already on that might elevate risk of side effects from Aduhelm. Can you elaborate a little bit more?
So I think I mentioned partly the risk of bleeding in the brain. So in the clinical trials, individuals could take a low dose, like a baby aspirin, but if they were on stronger prescription blood thinners, they were excluded because of the concerns about a greater risk. And sometimes people will already have, just either related to the Alzheimer's or just a condition that can happen with aging, the blood vessels in the brain can become a little leakier. And so when people come in and get screened for the study, they would typically get a baseline MRI. And if it's already showing some evidence of tiny areas of bleeding, then they wouldn't be a candidate if they're, if those are in sufficient numbers. The concern is they would be at much higher risk as well. So a lot of the safety issues are just related to things that might put someone at higher risk of the bleeding, either because they're already on a blood thinner or they already have some evidence of bleeding, or maybe they've had a previous stroke that makes them more vulnerable, a hemorrhagic stroke, or a stroke that was characterized by bleeding in the brain that makes them more at risk as well.
Great, thanks. So Stephen has a couple questions and comments. I think both are kind of related to this idea that some of the kind of major institutions and thought leaders in the country are skeptical about this. So he mentions that, you know, Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic are not, like Michigan Medicine are not moving forward with this, and that some of the leaders who were on the FDA's, one of the review boards, disagreed with the decision and I think resigned in protest. So none of you can comment further on those kinds of developments.
Before the FDA makes its official ruling, it often has a review of an external panel of advisors who may be experts in the field, and they gave their preliminary feedback. I think it was the prior November, which was pretty uniformly against approving it. And again, they were only posed the question of, should this drug be considered through the usual mechanism? Is this, you know, we have sort of strong evidence of it being safe and effective. And the vote was overwhelmingly against it. And so when the FDA ended up approving it through a different mechanism that wasn't even posed as a possibility to the external advisory panel, some of them felt that their skills or their feedback or, you know, they've been sort of misused or not heard. And so I believe 3 resigned after that. You know, there's been interesting editorials, one calling for the you know, the accelerated disapproval, you know, revoking of approval of aducanumab after it got the accelerated approval mechanism. And as you've heard, other major medical centers have weighed in and chosen not to offer it as well, such as, you know, Cleveland Clinic, Massachusetts General, you know, large thought leaders in this area. So absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then another question on why the single focus on amyloid plaques as opposed to tau tangles, which we know are also a cardinal feature of Alzheimer's. And the tau, I know, is often more tightly correlated with people's cognitive status than amyloid. So are there other tau focused approaches that are nearing being ready for prime time?
Yes, actually, on a yearly basis, there's often a review of all of the Alzheimer's drugs in the pipeline published in certain journals, and they will divide them by what mechanism action they're targeting. And for many, many years, you know, the anti-amyloid therapies were the bulk of the approaches, but that has really changed, where people are exploring a much broader range of mechanisms, including a lot of therapies targeting tau. It can be through a similar monoclonal antibody approach. Those drugs just aren't as far along in development right now, and the tracers to look at tau were developed and approved later in time, so there just hasn't been as much opportunity to study tau, you know, out in living individuals with these symptoms. But I think we're going to see more of an emphasis on you know, things beyond amyloid, which coincidentally is the theme of our Alzheimer's Research Center.
Great. Yeah, and as a psychologist and a Department of Health Behavior, I also want to point out that there are some non-pharmacological interventions that are being tested as well. I know the Alzheimer's Association right now is sponsoring a major prevention trial called the Pointer Trial, where the intervention is kind of a multimodal lifestyle intervention where they're trying to promote, you know, physical activity and diet and management of blood pressure, things like that. So I think there is increasing recognition that we need to kind of think about multiple different kinds of strategies that aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. So it's not, we shouldn't put all our eggs in one basket. And so my sense is, and maybe you would agree, is that maybe the future is not going to be just focused on, you know, one particular medication, but really, you know, trying to combine approaches.
Right. And it may be different combinations of therapies at different biological stages. So someone who might be at risk as they enter their 50s or 60s might be given one type of approach. Someone with early symptoms a different, someone more advanced symptoms a you know, very different one. Absolutely. Great.
Well, I think we are approaching the top of the hour, but thanks so much again. And I know you're fitting us in your clinical day, so we really appreciate it. And hopefully this was useful for everyone. And Lisa, I'll turn it back over to you to close us out.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you again, Dr. Heidebrink, and thank you, Dr. Roberts, Scott Roberts, co-chair. Appreciate you so much. At this point, we have concluded our agenda for this meeting, and I really appreciate everybody's attention all the way to the end. We will stick around for some virtual networking for anybody who wants to continue on, stay on the same Zoom channel here. We'll chat for a little while after the meeting concludes. But I did just want to let you know, again, I will be sending a follow-up email. It'll come from, well, not me, the Michigan Dementia Coalition, probably within the next few days, and it will have a recording in the PowerPoint presentations and the links that folks shared during our conversation today. But again, absolutely appreciate everyone being with us today and sharing your time and your experience and your expertise. We are stronger because of it. So if you'd like to take off, you are all welcome to take off, or you're welcome to stay. I'll be sticking around for some Zoom networking. So
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, everybody. Great to see everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
And I will stop the recording at this point, since it's just going to be us talking. So this, anybody who stays on, it will just be amongst us.